All right. Good morning. Welcome to What's Going On with Our Career Garage. This week we are talking to Chereen from Smeeny Made Wild, and I am really excited about this conversation. Every week we talk to somebody who works in the small business world about either how to support small businesses more effectively or the struggles that are going on in the world of small business. And I'm pretty jazzed about this particular conversation. Shireen and I met probably through Startup Colorado. Is my guest. They host a weekly, not weekly, monthly lean coffee. So if you're in Colorado and you are looking for some connection for rural businesses, Startup Colorado is a great place to be. They host virtual coffees that are delightful. And so that is how Shireen and I met. And I will let her give an introduction to her business and why it's awesome.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. So I have multiple businesses. I'm your classic multi-passionate creative, but my main business that I wanted to talk about was Smeeny Made Wild, it started as a hobby that turned into a side hustle, knitting handmade, sustainable, and ethically sourced wool beanies. And it basically grew into this adventurous creative community. I live up in Steamboat Springs, a mountain town. And so, I would always be sharing posts about my adventures and taking my beanies on trips and travel and things like that. And it really just grew into this creative community of all kinds of different makers and artists and creatives who wanted to grow a business. And my business it became my full time job. And in the last couple of years, I've really started going into more of this mentorship space where I've been helping other creatives build aligned businesses while also running my handmade business. So it's been really fun. I also host international creative retreats now, which has been really fun. And, in the last several years, especially, like, the online space has changed so much. And I know myself as a user and consumer of, social media or whatever, I really was like, I want to connect with these people in real life. I want to have shared experiences, not just this online, like, brain slop that's happening. How can we do that? And so I hosted my first creative retreat last year in Iceland, which was so incredible. And after that trip, it was like, how can I do so many more of these? And since then, I've hosted like a rafting retreat. I'm hosting another retreat in Ecuador this coming year. And it just brought me in this direction. And I'm excited to see what unfolds next.
Yeah, and so I really love that your focus is on creative businesses in general, and then especially kind of your fiber arts, your handicrafts, these things that frankly are pretty devalued a lot of times, right? So when we're talking about something that's hand knit, and in honor of you, I am currently wearing my very first knit shawl. I've been crocheting my whole life, but I picked up knitting a couple years ago, and so I'm still working on it, still learning. But it takes so long to make a product. Good yarn that is sourced well and ethical, and all of the things that you kind of talked about. It's expensive, and it can be really hard. Hi, Molly. Um, it can be really hard to get set a price point for those things that values that time, that creates a viable living for you, and really works for both the price point that consumers expect to pay, um, and then also works for the person who is creating. So talk a little bit about how you make a creative business financially viable for people and how you talk about that.
Yeah. Well, first, the shawl looks great. I can't believe it's your first knitting project because it looks amazing. But yeah, it is. I think that is the challenge that most of us makers, like creative business in general, but makers have the biggest struggle in is pricing because, you know, fast fashion, like all of these goods that are just made with non-ethical means are so cheap. And so people have been trained to think that they're price shopping. But I think that's where branding really matters. That's where knowing your why. And it's almost like, what is the mission behind your business? Because that when people buy a handmade product, they are buying the values, they're buying the story, they're buying who you are more than just the product. Like the product might be I think of it as almost like the vehicle to entering your world, but ultimately, like they're buying that world because you have to price appropriately. You have to charge your value for your time to make this. Like if you buy a handmade piece of anything, art, craft, there's so much love that has gone into it. There's so much story behind it. Even the materials, like I source from very specific companies for my yarn because I want to make sure they are doing ethical practice with how they raise the sheep. I want to make sure that it's a sustainable material, that they're using ethical practices in their dyeing, for example. Like all of the yarns that I use are made with biodegradable, chemical free dyes. And even the companies themselves like reduce water usage as far as their sustainability efforts. I'm a 1% for the planet partner, my business is, which means that I'm committed to donating 1% of my revenue, not just profit, to vetted environmental organizations. And those are just things that are really important to me and my brand. It's like, using this craft, this handmade beanie, and going outside as a way to talk about how much I care about the planet, why we need to protect our planet, public lands, our resources, standing up for human rights. Like all of these things are like the brand. And when people wear this hat, it's like a representation of those values. And so I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's like thinking about your product as the way that people come into your ecosystem.
Right. No, and I think that that market differentiation really matters, right? So, in the outdoor industry, right, everybody knows Patagonia is that style of brand, right? They're really focused on that. And their price point is a lot higher. In part, you're paying for, we are supporting this company versus something like Columbia, which also makes really great outdoor gear, but is at a lower price point and doesn't have that same environmental focus or reputation, right? And so there's nothing wrong with not having that reputation, but it is part of that differentiation. Pay me because I'm doing these values aligned things. And I think we're seeing that a lot more in a lot of small businesses where you're purchasing on this value. But it does especially show up in creative businesses. And I think something that people don't realize a lot about some of your hand knit stuff or some of your created anti fast fashion clothes is it does literally last longer, right? I have sweaters that I have had for years. This blanket on the couch behind me, my great grandmother knitted that in the 60s. Like
That's awesome.
it is, you know, like it is an old blanket and it's still in great shape. And so this idea of having things that last is also something that I think a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at some of these created goods from local businesses and local artisans. Um, and so kind of to that point, right? If you're making things that really last, um, and your goal is this longevity of product, how do you maintain business over a long period of time? Because the idea is somebody's going to buy your hat once and then they don't need another hat for a while unless they want another hat that looks cute or variety. But your goal really is that it doesn't wear out. So what is customer acquisition and how you really make that be like, good, buy my hats. They're awesome.
Totally. I mean, I think a big part, and like what you're saying, it's all about intentional living, intentional purchasing with these items. And so, as far as new customers and customer acquisition, it is, I mean, if you think about it, it's having this abundance mindset about the people who will discover your stuff. Like, I've been in business for 8 years now and still, like, handmade knit beanies, like and in my head, after the first couple years, I was like, everyone has one now, everyone knows this design now, should I make new designs? And, there were seasons where I'm, like, trying out all these different designs, new color palettes, new collections, and things like that, and I'm realizing, well, still realizing it's an ever evolving learning process, right? That no, not every single person, there are 8 billion people on this planet. Not all of them have your sustainable knit beanie, not even Colorado. And I think for me, like, I've been most of my business has been online until the last couple years when I started doing more markets and having that conversation and talking to the people about your product, meeting these new people and realizing, oh, they have no idea. They have never seen this before. Because I think when we're in the online space as creatives, you know, you follow a lot of the other people in your craft. Like as a knitter, there's a lot of knitters that I follow, a lot of knitters follow me. And so you think everyone knows this yarn, everyone knows this design, like blah, blah, blah. It's not true. We're in these little bubbles online. And so getting into the real world, and having those conversations has been really powerful to me, just having that abundance mindset, but also just like what we were talking about earlier with the branding, it is differentiation in your market, and people will recommend you. Like the people are like, I love my hat. It has lasted me so long. Now I want to get them as gifts for all of my friends. Or I've had a lot of companies like, hey, we want to do this as corporate gifts. Can I get like 50 hats? And I'm like, whoa, it's like for me, that's a really big order. And things like that. But that's kind of where that new client acquisition comes from, is doing that. And I want to talk a little bit about accessibility because like we were talking about earlier, the price point is higher. So I struggle with, wait, but is it inaccessible now? And so how I manage that is I also donate to a lot of things. Like I donate to a lot of raffle prizes or, silent auctions or just baskets for different aligned nonprofits or organizations. And so that also exposes you to new demographics as well that are aligned. And I think that's the important thing, is finding a values aligned customer, and thinking of them as a community member, which has been really big for me. It's not just a customer that's buying from you and it's a transaction. It's like you are now entering this community, and now I have these other things that we can connect on, or that maybe down the line someone came in buying a hat, but hey, now this person has come on a retreat with me and we are now like actual real life friends, like that kind of thing that is really powerful. And again, I'm a multi-passionate person, and so I've tried a bunch of different things in my business. And I think the sustainability and the longevity for me has come from allowing myself to evolve creatively as a business owner and just have a diverse offering as well, like having multiple income streams essentially.
Yeah. So yeah, so speaking of that community, right? So you have this business, you sell a lot of stuff online, you have built a very cool online community in Discord, and then you have this rewilding aspect to your business where the goal of that is really to connect people to the outdoors, to connect them to the wild spaces in their own life. And so how do you balance, hey, I'm building this online community, and then I want you to go outside and do these wild things. And we tend to think culturally that being online is sort of this antithesis to wild, but you really blend them together in some very interesting ways. So how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? I think it's recognizing that there are people who just want to connect with like-minded people. And I feel really grateful that in my real life in-person community, I have a lot of that here. And that's why I'm sharing those stories and sharing this lifestyle of getting outside. And again, the product itself is like the welcome card into this community. And then online, knowing that there's also a lot of people who might not have that in person, but seeing, how when you haven't seen what's possible, or like don't think of another way, or haven't seen another way of doing things, you don't think you can. But for all the things that we don't like about the internet and social media, those have been some of the really positive things. And so viewing the internet and the online spaces that we're creating as like, this is letting someone else into the window of your world and sharing that together, and hopefully inspiring someone to get outside, to, make a change in their life that they've been wanting to make. And I've seen that in real time with the people that have come into my community. And then they've been connecting separately too, which has been so cool. Like maybe they met in the Discord, but now they've gotten coffee because they actually both live in North Carolina, like that kind of stuff, which has been so amazing. Like, I think, I actually just left Instagram for my business. I still have my account there, but I left it because I was like, I want to focus on other things now. I also struggle and have a conflict with social media right now myself internally and like the attention economy and all of that stuff. And it just felt like a lot has shifted. But focusing on places like Discord and YouTube, where I feel like there is more depth, there is more connection. It's like we are having those conversations, and then people are then rippling out and doing things outside because they see, oh, you know what, you inspired me to go on a hike when it's cold because now I have the proper gear and outside is fun now. Or talking about seasonal living, building seasonality into your business model and your own like natural rhythms and how important that is. And that's really what rewilding means to me. It's reconnecting with yourself because a lot of us feel disconnected in this world, connecting with nature, connecting with the seasons, and really just slowing down enough to listen to those things and to feel grounded in that. And I think we were talking about earlier before we got on this, like your landscaping business and how do you build something sustainable that is seasonal and make it profitable and work for you year round. And that's kind of what my business has been too, like selling things in a way that works with my seasons. And I live in a ski town. So the busiest parts of I basically am selling from September to April of the beanies. And people are like, wait, so you don't sell year round? And I'm like, you know what I found out after the first couple of years of being like, oh, maybe in the summer I'll make market baskets, I'll make koozies and all this stuff. If I instead use those 6 months, or I don't know how many months that was, but those months to work on my systems, to build inventory, and to not sell when selling was quote unquote hard, and instead refine, play, have fun, enjoy myself. And then in the busy seasons, that's when I'm selling, and selling is quote unquote easier. I can now sell more in that time. So, yeah, it's like building that all in, but a lot of that goes into just knowing why you're doing what you're doing, what your actual goals are, like what you want your life to look like, and we can mold our business to work with that. And I think a lot of people do it the other way around, or they're listening to the traditional business advice out there and it doesn't work for creatives, you know?
Yeah, it's so funny you kind of talk about that seasonality of I love seasonal businesses, and my background was seasonal work for my entire career history up until I started Outgrow Your Garage, which because we do business education is a little bit more inherently year round. Uh, Excuse me. But I loved that aspect, and that was actually why my first real business was a landscaping business, is because I had gotten a year-round job at this arts nonprofit. And we had this period of time that was slow. And I was like, why do I have to show up to work every day if there's not really anything to do? And people were like, this is how jobs work. And I was like, no, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. This is insane. And I immediately went and started a seasonal business so that I could have those months off that I was really accustomed to in the seasonal business world, because you have those, you get used to those months where you're just kind of chill, right? And there's not a lot going on, and that is your time to reset. And in landscaping, that was the time for operations and planning things out and really thinking about, okay, what does my finances look like and what do I need to make? And I would know um, from in landscaping, your busiest season is May and June. And so I actually knew by the end of June whether or not I'd be able to pay my bills next February, which meant I had months to solve that problem. And so having that seasonality really works for me in terms of those businesses. Other people are like, that sounds like the most stressful thing I have ever encountered in my entire life. How do you handle that? But it is something that we work on a lot, and something we see a lot in rural communities, especially in Colorado. Like if you had a retail business in Steamboat, you would still be seasonal because the economy of Steamboat is inherently kind of seasonal, because you get all of these people who are coming in during ski season, and you get some people who come in during the summer, but you have these months that just don't have as many people in town coming in to spend those dollars. And so I think more people run seasonal businesses than we think about a lot of times, because of the aspect of how a tourism town works.
Totally. And it almost like, I mean, I'm very similar to you where I did seasonal work for a long time too. And when I started my business, and because of the inherent seasonality of the town, I'm like, this is awesome. I can still take, I took like 2 months off, completely from running the business. And I'm still making my full-time income because I know and can project what that looks like. And there was a few years where I was working on a farm, and farming, as we all know, it literally is the definition of a seasonal business. And kind of modeling what farm work looked like. You have your seasons where you're planting seeds, but then you have the time when you're literally having to let the soil rest. You're making your crop plans, you're going on vacay, like all of those things in order to have an abundant growing season. And that's kind of this model that I've created for even now that I'm doing a lot of creative business mentorship. It's this rewilding model where we're looking at what season are you in right now, both internally and externally. So maybe it's spring, the literal season of spring right now, but what season are you in these various aspects of your life and business? Because that's going to change what you're doing in those aspects. So maybe you are in a fall of your business where things feel very stable. You're kind of now in this part where you put in all this work, but now you're reaping the rewards. You're like harvesting the fruit from what you've grown in your business. And that's okay. And it's knowing that. And so how do we move along in these next cycles? So maybe it's like from my knitting business, actually, this is where I'm at with it. I'm actively moving it from this season of autumn into a season of winter, figuratively, because I'm now growing this new branch of the business with the coaching, mentorship, and retreats. And the knitting business is what is giving me financial stability right now. Like, that is an established business. I know what to expect from it. I know what I need to do to get me the income that I need from it. But if I move it into this winter where I can allow it to be more quiet, I can even shrink it a little bit to create the space to go into a spring of this building phase of this other side of the business. Like, those are the things that are necessary, because if everything's in a spring phase or a summer phase, we're just going to be exhausted and burned out. And that's not what we want. Like, a lot of the advice out there, I think, they're like growing, scaling, building a team so you can keep pushing and pushing and pushing. I'm like, that sounds exhausting. I don't want that. I want to live my life. I want to build something that supports me, but that allows me to live my life, and that I'm not actively trying to continue to grow to keep up with the now new people on my team. And, nothing against doing that either. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's knowing what you want and knowing what you need to do to get yourself there.
Yeah, I think infinite growth is not, it's just not feasible, in general, full stop. But I think that that goal of stability in your business, I think it really matters, right? Where you have it. And I think about even big companies. I think about 3M a lot, which is a very, very old company. They make Post-its for anybody who doesn't know, right? So like your Post-its. Is a 3M brand. They make adhesives, they do all kinds of stuff. But they're an old company and they just kind of do their thing. They're pretty stable, right? They're the kind of company, if you're into investing in the stock market and making a lot of money through growth companies, you don't invest in 3M. But if you want a really good product that you know what you're going to get and is solid and is just kind of chill, then like 3M is a company that does that. And I think when I think about where I want my business to be in 10 years, that's what I want, right? Kind of that same thing. Like, I want it to be stable. I want it to do the things that I need. I want it to provide for my life in the ways that that works, but I don't need to be a household name. I don't need to be the biggest company that has ever been. I just want to do my thing. And I think that's where a lot of businesses are, of you just want to have enough to provide for your family, to provide for your community, to do the things that you value. And to do that, you need to take time off. You need to know what you want. And we are starting to come to time here. So to that end, you're running a retreat that helps people figure those things out. Talk talk about this retreat that you're planning to Ecuador, or anything you want to share about the previous one in Iceland, which I went to Iceland a couple years ago and it was astonishingly beautiful. So I'm a little sad I missed out on that one.
Well, you can come to Ecuador. Um, well, I think that's kind of where the whole idea of creating these retreats came from. Is first, as you know from traveling, travel really brings us out of our day-to-day routines into this space of like curiosity, expanding our perspectives, and it actually gives us that step away from the noise so we can breathe and think about what we actually want. And it's just this, it's like a vehicle. I use the word vehicle a lot, I guess, but it's like this vehicle for expansion and reimagining. It's giving us that ability to actually think more of a big picture. And on top of that, it's like the act of traveling and learning new things has been just so expansive for me. And so I was like, if we can gather other creative business owners into a space like this, where then we can also talk about business, talk about creativity, and be creative outside of the productivity in our businesses, but like just create for the sake of fun and creating, like we're going to come back with such a better idea of what we want to do next, with more clarity, with actual community and like support now. And so on these retreats, it's kind of a twofold type of trip. We're going on a fun trip to Ecuador. I work with a local operator, so they handle like logistics and stuff. So we get to do all these cool activities while we're there. And then throughout the retreat, I host these workshops and we'll have these like mastermind conversations essentially about various topics. And this one's main focus is going to be rooted leadership, whether it's leaders in our own life or the leaders of our community, and cultivating community. What does community actually mean? And I picked Ecuador for this trip because we will be visiting a few indigenous villages and in the Amazon, which I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be so fun. Um, but basically, it's like shifting our perspectives away from the northern hemisphere. We're entering the southern hemisphere. We're kind of going right after the autumn equinox. So it's like we're in autumn, they're in spring, and we're crossing that line into this space, entering these villages where it's very community focused. They have a ton of local artisan history, so we'll be learning some of those things, but really seeing what community means for these villages and what that can look like in our life. And it is to me, especially as a creative that wants to stay a solopreneur, it's like, how are we building a community around what we do, whether that's like other creative business owners that we can talk to, lean on, that we can mutually support each other, or like the actual community of customers and buyers and people that are coming into our worlds to support us financially, you know? So that's really what the retreat is about. It's happening in October. We still have I think at this time 12 spaces left. So we're about halfway filled. I'm very excited. And also um I also do creative mentorship and coaching now. So work with people one-on-one to build their businesses in aligned ways. And I have a link that you can check it out where you can apply and we can have a discussion. Like we can just hop on a call and see what your goals are and that kind of thing. And I also have a free little rewilding guide. It's the spring rewilding guide where it really helps you set your intentions, figure out what your priorities are for this season, and map out this next season in your business too.
Excellent. Yeah. So all of those links are in the description for anybody who is curious about learning more about what is going on with Smeeny Made Wild or retreats, or any of the things that we have talked about here today. I am pretty jazzed. And I love seeing kind of what is going on in your business. I think it's a ton of fun. And retreats are just, they're kind of one of those things. Like it's nice to have mentorship. It's nice to talk to people who understand about how your business operates. It's nice to take that break, and really think about what are you trying to do. And it's nice to make other friends. One of the things I think is true about entrepreneurship in general is it's kind of lonely. And you do need to be able to make friends and make a community of people who understand what it's like to run a business, particularly since so many of us don't live in households where that is true, or don't have families. If you're not from an entrepreneurship family, like y- you don't have anybody to talk to. You don't get, people are like, oh, just take some time off. Like you don't have to do that too. You're like, no, I really, really do have to do that today. And so I'm really delighted that you have built this community and that you're so focused on that. So yeah, so check out the links in the description. Next week on What's Going On, we are going to be talking to Francis Padilla of the SBA the Small Business Administration, about lending and how to get capital and finances and how do you grow your business using some government programs that have lower interest rate, and how do you set up capital and money in your business so that you can grow it, which I'm pretty jazzed about. So tune in next week for that. And Chereen, is there anything else you want to share as a closing?
No, just thank you for having me. I hope everyone stays wild and enjoys this next season and just you're not alone. We're all doing it, you know?
Great. Well, then hopefully I'll see everybody next week and enjoy the rest of your day.